The sun dipped low behind the weathered buildings of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma Territory, casting long shadows that stretched like accusing fingers across the dusty street. Naomi Jackson kept her eyes downcast as she hurried along the boardwalk, clutching her market basket tightly against her side. The whispers followed her like autumn leaves swirling around her ankles, impossible to outrun. "Half-breed," someone muttered as she passed. Naomi quickened her pace, her heart pounding against her ribs like a frightened bird. At 22, she had spent her entire life in this growing frontier town, yet had never truly belonged. The daughter of a white settler father and a Cherokee mother, she existed in the painful space between two worlds accepted fully by neither. Her mother had died 3 winters ago, leaving Naomi alone in a town that barely tolerated her presence. Her father had passed when she was just a child, and the relatives who had grudgingly taken her in made no secret of their resentment. Now that she had come of age and moved into her own small cabin on the outskirts of town, their disdain had only grown more open. The general store's bell jingled as she entered, and the conversation inside died instantly. Mrs. Holloway, the shopkeeper's wife, pressed her lips into a thin line as Naomi approached the counter. "I need 5 pounds of flour and some coffee, please," Naomi said softly, placing a carefully counted pile of coins on the counter. "We're nearly out of flour, Mrs. Holloway replied, not moving to fill the order. "Best save what we have for regular customers." The humiliation burned like bile in Naomi's throat. "I have the money right here." "Money isn't everything, girl." The older woman's eyes were cold. "My customers don't take kindly to sharing space with—" She left the sentence unfinished, but her meaning hung in the air, clear as crystal. Naomi stood frozen, aware of every eye in the store upon her. She had endured this treatment all her life, but it never hurt any less. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her coins. "I'll take that flour and coffee," a deep voice drawled from behind her, "and whatever else the lady needs." Naomi turned to find herself looking up into the steadiest pair of blue eyes she had ever seen. The man standing there was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and a shock of sandy hair beneath his wide-brimmed hat. His clothes were travel-worn but clean, a newcomer then. He didn't yet know who she was, what she was. "I don't think you understand, sir, Mrs. Holloway began with a forced smile. "I understand just fine," he replied, his voice pleasant but with steel underneath. "The lady placed an order. I'm just making sure she gets what she came for." The silence in the store grew thicker. Naomi wanted to shrink into herself, to disappear, but she remained standing straight, her chin lifted slightly despite her embarrassment. "And who might you be?" Mr. Holloway emerged from the back room, sizing up the stranger. "Kieran Murphy," the man replied easily, extending his hand. "Just arrived from Kansas, looking to put down roots." Mr. Holloway ignored the outstretched hand. "Well, Mr. Murphy, you should know that we have certain ways in this town, certain standards." Kieran's smile didn't waver, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Interesting. Where I come from, we have standards too, like treating people with basic decency." His gaze swept the store before returning to Naomi. "Madam, perhaps we should take our business elsewhere." Before Naomi could respond, he placed a hand lightly at her elbow, guiding her toward the door. She was too stunned to resist, allowing herself to be led out onto the street. "I don't need your charity," she said once they were outside, finding her voice at last. "Good, because I wasn't offering any," he replied, his smile genuine now. "I just can't abide bullies, especially ones who hide behind respectability." Naomi studied him cautiously. "You're new here, you don't understand." "What's to understand? They were refusing to sell to you because—" He paused, waiting for her to fill in the blank. "Because I'm half Cherokee," she said, lifting her chin defiantly, waiting for the familiar change in his expression, the subtle shift from friendliness to discomfort or disdain. But his expression remained unchanged. "Is that all? Way they were acting, I thought you might be an outlaw." He chuckled softly. "My grandmother was 1/4 Osage. Used to tell me stories about her people that would make your hair stand on end. Naomi stared at him, uncertain whether to believe him. Men had lied to her before, pretending acceptance only to betray her trust later when it suited them. "There's Whitaker's trading post on the edge of town," she said instead of responding to his claim. "They'll sell to anyone with money. I can get what I need there." "I'll walk with you," he said. "I need supplies myself. Just got into town this morning and haven't had a chance to stock up." They walked in silence for a few moments, Naomi acutely aware of the stares they were attracting. A half-breed woman walking with a white man who wasn't treating her with contempt was quite the spectacle in Oklahoma City. "You shouldn't be seen with me," she finally said. "Not if you're planning to stay. It won't do your reputation any good," Kieran snorted. "My reputation's survived worse. Besides, I haven't decided if I'm staying yet. Depends on if this place has anything worthwhile to offer." "It's growing fast," Naomi found herself saying. The railroads brought new people, new opportunities, land still available for those looking to settle. "And what about you? Your family been here long?" The question was innocent enough, but Naomi hesitated before answering. "My father came with the land run of '89. My mother was already here. Her people had been relocated to Indian Territory decades before. And now, they're both gone. I have a small place just outside town. I get by." They reached Whitaker's trading post, a ramshackle building that served those whom the more respectable establishments turned away. Inside, Kieran helped her gather her supplies, adding his own purchases to the pile on the counter. As they exited, Naomi turned to him. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Murphy, but I can manage from here." He tipped his hat to her. "It was my pleasure, Miss Jackson, Naomi Jackson, Miss Jackson. Perhaps I'll see you around town." She gave him a sad smile. "For your sake, I hope not." As she walked away, she could feel his eyes on her back, and something unfamiliar fluttered in her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. The following week passed in its usual rhythm for Naomi. She tended her small garden, took in sewing and mending to make ends meet, and ventured into town only when absolutely necessary. Each time she did, the treatment she received seemed to worsen. News of her interaction with the newcomer had spread, fueling resentment among those who already despised her. On Wednesday, she found a dead rattlesnake on her doorstep, its head crushed but positioned as a warning. On Friday, someone threw a rock through her window while she slept, sending shards of glass across her floor like scattered stars. She swept them up without reporting the incident. The town marshal had made it clear long ago that her complaints were unwelcome. On Sunday, she avoided the church where she was not wanted anyway, and instead sat by the creek that ran near her property, reading from her mother's worn Bible. The late April sun was warm on her face, the pages familiar beneath her fingers as she mouthed the words that had comforted generations before her. "Miss Jackson," she startled at the voice, nearly dropping the Bible into the water. Kieran Murphy stood a few yards away, leading a chestnut horse by its reins. "Mr. Murphy," she acknowledged, quickly rising to her feet. "You startled me. My apologies. I've been exploring the area, getting a feel for the land." He patted his horse's neck. "This is Copper. He's been my only companion for quite some time now." The horse nickered softly, as if in agreement. Despite herself, Naomi smiled. "He's beautiful," she said, stepping closer to stroke the animal's velvety nose. Copper leaned into her touch, making her smile widen. "He likes you," Kieran observed. "He's usually wary of strangers." "I've always had a way with animals," Naomi admitted. "They don't judge based on bloodlines." Kieran's expression sobered. "I heard about the incidents at your home. Word travels fast in small towns." Naomi's hand fell away from the horse. "It's nothing I'm not used to." "That doesn't make it right." His voice had that same steel she'd heard in the general store. "Have you reported it to the marshal?" She laughed without humor. "Marshal Davis. He made it clear years ago that my kind shouldn't expect protection from his office." Kieran's jaw tightened visibly. "This place is worse than I thought." It's no different from most towns in these parts, Naomi said with a shrug. Some are better, many are worse. People fear what they don't understand and they hate what they fear. Is that why you stay? Because it could be worse elsewhere? The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her why she remained in a town that treated her so poorly. This is my home, she said simply. My mother is buried here. My father too. The land I live on was his claim, and it's all I have left of either of them. Where would I go that would be any different? Kieran seemed to consider this, gazing out over the creek where the water bubbled over smooth stones. What if there was somewhere different? Somewhere people could live without being judged by their bloodlines or where they came from. Such a place doesn't exist, Naomi said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. It could, he replied, his eyes intense as they met hers. People create the communities they live in. They decide what values matter, what rules to follow. People like those in town, people who leave dead snakes as warnings. No, Kieran said softly. People like you and me, people who see past differences to the humanity beneath. Naomi stared at him, trying to understand what he was suggesting. You're talking about leaving, starting fresh somewhere else. I'm talking about building something better right here. There's land available. Good land with water access, timber for building. A few like-minded people could stake claims, create a settlement that operates by different rules. You're dreaming, Mr. Murphy. The same people who hate me now would hate me there. Then we'll make our own community, he said firmly. One where everyone has value regardless of their heritage. The words hung between them, impossible and tempting all at once. Naomi shook her head slowly. You've been here barely a week. You don't know what you're suggesting. I've been moving from place to place for 5 years, Miss Jackson. I've seen the best and worst of people across half a dozen territories. I know exactly what I'm suggesting. And why would you do this? Why would you throw in your lot with someone like me? Kieran's expression softened. Because when I look at you, I don't see someone like you. I see a woman of courage and dignity who deserves better than what this town has given her. Heat rushed to Naomi's cheeks, and she looked away, unable to bear the sincerity in his gaze. You hardly know me. I'd like to change that. He stepped closer, causing her to look up at him again. Have dinner with me tonight. Let me tell you more about what I have in mind. Every instinct told her to refuse, to protect herself from the inevitable disappointment. Men like Kieran Murphy, handsome, confident, full of grand ideas, didn't associate with women like her unless they wanted something. And yet, my cabin, she heard herself say, at sundown I don't have much, but I can prepare a meal. His smile was like sunrise breaking over the plains. I'll bring some supplies, and Naomi. He used her given name for the first time. Thank you for listening. As he led Copper away, Naomi stood rooted to the spot, her heart racing with an emotion she couldn't quite name. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder, what if? The hours before sundown passed in a flurry of activity as Naomi cleaned her small cabin, prepared what food she had, and changed into her one good dress, a simple blue cotton that her mother had sewn for her before falling ill. She caught herself humming as she worked, a tune her mother had taught her, and the realization brought both a smile and a pang of guilt. What would Singing Bird think of her daughter now, eagerly awaiting the visit of a white man she barely knew? Kieran arrived exactly at sundown, his arms laden with packages. I hope you don't mind, he said as he entered, but I brought a few things. A few was an understatement. He set down coffee, sugar, salt pork, fresh bread from the town bakery, and even a small jar of preserves. Naomi stared at the bounty in disbelief. This is too much, she protested. Nonsense. Consider it my contribution to our planning session. He removed his hat, revealing hair that glowed golden in the lamplight. Something smells delicious. Just a rabbit stew, she said, suddenly self-conscious about her modest offering. Perfect. I haven't had a home-cooked meal in months. His appreciation seemed genuine as he settled at her small table. As they ate, Kieran told her about his life. Born in Boston to Irish immigrant parents, he had headed west after their deaths, working as a cowhand, gold prospector, and most recently as a scout for land surveyors in Kansas. His travels had taken him through Indian territory multiple times, and he spoke with respect of the tribes he had encountered. "My grandmother used to tell me that wisdom comes from listening to different voices," he said. "The more I've traveled, the more I believe she was right." "And yet most people prefer the comfort of sameness," Naomi observed, pouring them both coffee. "They want everyone around them to look alike, think alike, worship alike." "Most people are afraid of what's different," Kieran agreed, "but some of us are drawn to it." "I've been in towns where Spanish, Black, Indian, and white folks all work together, trade together. It can be done." "Not here," Naomi said firmly. "Maybe not in Oklahoma City proper, but what about just beyond its reach? There's land available to the north along the Cimarron River. Good water, good soil, timber for building. It's far enough from town to avoid daily interference but close enough to access the railroad and trading opportunities." Naomi's brow furrowed as she considered. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" "Completely." His eyes locked with hers across the table. "I came west looking for somewhere to belong, somewhere to build something meaningful. Every time I thought I'd found it, something was missing. The people weren't right, or the opportunity wasn't there, or the land itself didn't speak to me." "And Oklahoma Territory speaks to you?" There was skepticism in her voice. "Not exactly," he said with a slight smile, "but something here does." The implication hung in the air between them. Naomi looked away, her cheeks warming. "You barely know me, Mr. Murphy." "Kieran," he corrected gently, "and I know enough. I know you've endured hardship that would have broken many others. I know you have roots here that you're reluctant to abandon. I know you're intelligent and resourceful. The rest," he shrugged, "the rest we can learn about each other over time." "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple at all," he admitted. "Building something worthwhile never is, but I believe it's possible, and I'm asking if you're willing to consider it." Naomi stood and moved to her small window, gazing out at the night sky speckled with stars. In the distance, she could see the faint glow of Oklahoma City's lights. For 22 years, that town had been the center of her world despite its cruelty toward her. "My father's grave is here," she said softly. "My mother's too. We wouldn't be going far," Kieran replied. "You could visit them whenever you wished." She turned to face him. "And what would this community of yours look like? Who would be part of it? People who value freedom and fairness. People who judge others by their character, not their bloodlines." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I have friends, a former slave who fought for the Union and now works as a blacksmith, a Mexican family who lost their ranch in Texas, a widow from Kansas whose husband was killed by raiders. Good people looking for a fresh start. And they would accept someone like me, someone with Indian blood. They would welcome you, Naomi, as would others who might join us, people seeking something better than what places like Oklahoma City can offer." The idea was beginning to take shape in her mind, impossible yet tantalizing. "And you, what do you seek?" Kieran rose from his chair and moved to stand before her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. "A place to put down roots, people worth fighting for, a purpose larger than myself. And if this dream of yours fails, then we try again, or we find another dream. But at least we'll have tried to build something better." His conviction was like a flame warming her from within. How long had it been since she'd felt hope like this, since she'd allowed herself to imagine a future beyond mere survival? "I need time," she whispered. "Time to think, of course." He stepped back, respecting her space. "I plan to ride out to the Cimarron tomorrow to survey the land more thoroughly. Would you consider coming with me? See for yourself what possibilities exist there." She should say no. She should thank him for dinner and send him on his way. She should protect her heart from the inevitable disappointment that would follow such wild dreams. "Yes," she said instead, "I'll come with you." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the plains. "I'll be here at dawn." After he left, Naomi sat alone by her dying fire, her mind racing with possibilities she had never dared to consider before. A community where she might belong, people who would accept her for who she was. And Kieran Murphy, a man who looked at her and saw not a half-breed but a woman of value. It was dangerous to hope. Hope could break a heart more thoroughly than hatred ever could. Yet as she prepared for bed, Naomi found herself humming her mother's song again, and this time she did not stop. Dawn arrived in a palette of pinks and golds, the sky ablaze with promise as Naomi prepared for the journey. She dressed practically in a split-riding skirt her mother had made years ago, tucked her hair beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and packed a small satchel with food and water. Her nerves jangled like wind chimes in a storm as she waited for Kieran to arrive. When he appeared, leading not only his own horse but a gentle gray mare for her, Naomi felt a rush of gratitude. Few had ever shown such consideration for her comfort or needs. "Her name is Willow," Kieran said as he helped Naomi mount. "She belongs to the livery stable owner, but he's willing to sell if you take a liking to her." "I can't afford a horse," Naomi said automatically. "Let's worry about that later. For now, she's yours for the day." They rode north out of town, Kieran leading the way through rolling grasslands dotted with stands of cottonwood and oak. The April morning was cool but promised warmth as the sun climbed higher. Birds called overhead, and twice they startled deer from their resting places in tall grass. "It's beautiful," Naomi admitted as they paused on a rise overlooking a sweeping valley. "I've rarely ventured this far from town." "This is just the beginning," Kieran said, gesturing ahead. "The Cimarron is about another hour's ride." "The land changes as we get closer to the river, more trees, richer soil." They continued on, Naomi gradually relaxing in Willow's saddle. The mare was gentle and responsive, seeming to sense her rider's initial nervousness. By the time they reached the river, Naomi was riding with confidence, her body moving in rhythm with the horse's gait. The Cimarron River was not particularly wide but flowed strong and clear, bordered by a generous belt of trees. Kieran led her along its banks until they reached a natural clearing where he dismounted and helped her down. "This is it," he said, his voice quiet with reverence. "This is where I believe we could build something." Naomi looked around, taking in the setting. The clearing was large enough for several buildings, with the river providing water and the surrounding forest offering timber and game. The soil beneath her feet was rich and dark. "It feels—" She hesitated, searching for the right word. "Peaceful." "I felt the same thing when I first discovered it 3 days ago," Kieran said. "Come, let me show you more." For the next few hours, he led her through the area, pointing out natural advantages: a spring-fed tributary ideal for drinking water, a stretch of river shallow enough for crossing, areas suitable for planting crops or grazing livestock. Naomi found herself caught up in his enthusiasm, beginning to see through his eyes what might be possible here. They stopped for a midday meal beneath a massive oak tree, spreading a blanket on the ground and sharing the food they had brought. A comfortable silence settled between them as they ate, broken only by the river's gentle murmur and birdsong overhead. "My mother would have loved this place," Naomi said at last. "She always felt trapped in town, but my father needed to be near his business." "Tell me about them," Kieran invited, stretching out on the blanket beside her. Naomi hesitated, then began to speak. She told him how her father, Jonathan Jackson, had come to Indian Territory as a young man, establishing a freight business that served the growing settlements. How he had met her mother, Singing Bird, when her Cherokee family needed goods transported. How they had fallen in love despite the disapproval of both their communities. "They were happy for a time," she said, a wistful smile touching her lips. "My earliest memories are of laughter in our home. My father teaching me to read, my mother teaching me the ways of her people. But when I was 8, my father was killed when his wagon overturned during a storm." "I'm sorry," Kieran said softly. "After that, everything changed. My mother and I were suddenly alone, unwelcome in the town my father had helped build." His sister and her husband took us in, but they made it clear it was out of duty, not affection. They resented my mother, blamed her for trapping my father into marriage, when she died 3 years ago. The loss must have been unbearable, Kieran said when she didn't continue. It was like losing my connection to half of myself, Naomi admitted. She had taught me so much about her people, their language, their stories, but there was still so much I didn't know, so much I wanted to ask her. And your father's family. After your mother passed, they made it clear I was no longer their responsibility. I was 19, old enough to fend for myself. They allowed me to live in the old cabin on the edge of my father's property, the one you visited last night. It was meant for hired help originally. The main house and most of the land were sold years ago to pay my father's debts. Kieran's expression darkened. They abandoned you. They never wanted me in the first place, Naomi said without self-pity. I was a reminder of what they saw as my father's greatest mistake. Loving your mother was a mistake, in their eyes, yes, in the eyes of most people in town. Kieran sat up, his gaze intense as it held hers. And in your eyes, do you see yourself as a mistake, Naomi? The question struck her like a physical blow. No one had ever asked her that before. She had spent so long adapting to others' perceptions that she had rarely stopped to consider her own. I don't know, she admitted. I've always been caught between two worlds, never fully belonging to either. Perhaps you're meant for a new world altogether, he suggested gently. One that doesn't force you to choose between parts of yourself. The idea resonated within her like a perfectly struck bell. A new world. A place where she could be whole, not fractured by others' prejudices. Is that truly possible? She whispered. I believe it is. Kieran reached out, his fingers lightly brushing a strand of hair from her face. And I believe you're strong enough to help create it. The touch sent warmth spreading through her, a sensation both frightening and exhilarating. No man had ever looked at her the way Kieran Murphy did now, as if she were something precious, something worthy. The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged with possibility. Then a distant rumble of thunder broke the spell, and both looked up to see clouds gathering on the western horizon. We should head back, Kieran said, reluctantly withdrawing his hand. Spring storms can move quickly over these plains. They packed up their things and mounted their horses, riding at a faster pace than before. The wind picked up as they traveled, carrying the scent of rain, and by the time Oklahoma City came into view, the first heavy drops were beginning to fall. We won't make it to your cabin before the worst hits, Kieran called over the rising wind. There's a line shack about half a mile ahead. We can shelter there until it passes. Naomi nodded, pulling her hat lower as the rain intensified. They urged their horses to a canter, reaching the abandoned herder's shack just as lightning split the sky above them. The structure was small but sound, with a dirt floor and a stone fireplace. Kieran quickly tended to the horses, securing them beneath a lean-to attached to the shack's side, while Naomi found kindling and logs stacked near the fireplace. By the time Kieran entered, shaking rain from his hat and coat, she had a small fire started, its light casting dancing shadows on the rough walls. "You're full of surprises, Miss Jackson," he said with admiration. "Not many city folk know how to start a fire so efficiently." "My mother taught me," she replied, warming her hands by the flames. "She said a fire is more than heat and light, it's the heart of a home. Wise woman." Kieran removed his wet coat and hung it on a peg near the door before joining her by the fire, the storm settling in. "Might be a while before we can leave safely." Naomi nodded, suddenly aware of their isolation. They were alone, miles from town, in a one-room shack as a storm raged outside. It was the sort of situation that would ruin a woman's reputation completely if she had any reputation left to ruin. As if sensing her thoughts, Kieran maintained a respectful distance, stretching his hands toward the fire without moving closer to her. "Tell me," he said, "what did you think of the land by the Cimarron?" Grateful for the neutral topic, Naomi considered her answer. "It's beautiful, fertile." "I can see why you're drawn to it. But are you?" he pressed gently. Could you imagine building a life there? Outside, thunder crashed and rain lashed against the shack's single window. Inside, the fire crackled, creating a cocoon of warmth and light that seemed to exist outside of time. I can imagine it, Naomi admitted softly. But imagination and reality are different things. Even if we could claim that land, even if we could build structures and plant crops, what makes you think people would come? What makes you think they would accept a community founded by a drifter and a half-breed? Those aren't the labels I'd use, Kieran said, his voice gentle but firm. And they're not the ones that matter. What matters is what we build, what values we establish. The world doesn't work that way, Kieran. People don't simply shed their prejudices because we wish them to. Some don't, he agreed. But some do. Some are searching for exactly what we could offer, a place where judgment comes from character, not appearance or background. He shifted closer, not touching her but near enough that she could feel the warmth of him alongside the fire's heat. I've seen it happen, Naomi, in mining camps and frontier settlements. When people face common challenges, work toward common goals, the barriers between them can fall away. Not always, not completely, but enough to build something real. And if they don't, she challenged. If we build this dream of yours and no one comes, or worse, if they come only to realize they cannot accept someone of mixed blood among them, then they're not the right people for what we're creating, he said simply. And we keep looking until we find those who are. His certainty was like a lighthouse beam cutting through fog, steady, unwavering, offering guidance. Naomi had lived so long without such certainty that she hardly knew how to respond to it. Why do you care so much? She asked finally. Why does it matter to you what happens to someone like me? Kieran was silent for a long moment, staring into the flames. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and tinged with old pain. My mother died when I was 16. Consumption. My father followed a year later, some said from grief, others from the bottle he turned to after losing her. I was alone in a city that saw me only as another Irish immigrant, good for manual labor and little else. He poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling upward. I know what it's like to be judged for something you can't control, to be seen as less than human because of your origins. The Irish in Boston weren't lynched or driven from their homes like Indians have been, but they were despised, relegated to the lowest positions, denied opportunities. So this is about righting old wrongs? Naomi asked. No. Kieran looked up from the fire, his eyes meeting hers. This is about creating something right from the beginning, and it's about you, Naomi Jackson. Me. From the moment I saw you standing in that store, refusing to cower despite their cruelty, I knew you were someone exceptional, someone with the strength to build something new, something better. The raw honesty in his voice stole Naomi's breath. No one had ever spoken to her this way, seen her this way. It was terrifying and wonderful all at once. I'm not what you think I am, she whispered. I'm not strong, I'm just surviving. Survival itself requires strength, he countered. But you've done more than survive, Naomi. You've maintained your dignity, your compassion. That's rare, especially after enduring what you have. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the shack, something was shifting, changing between them. Naomi felt it like a physical current, pulling her toward this man who saw in her what no one else ever had. I'm afraid, she admitted, the words barely audible above the fire's crackling. Of what? Of hoping. Of believing, of trusting someone only to be betrayed again. Kieran moved then, closing the distance between them, taking her hands gently in his own. His touch was warm, calloused from work but infinitely tender. I can't promise that everything will be easy, he said, his voice low and earnest. Building something worthwhile never is. But I can promise that I will never betray your trust, Naomi. Never. She looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deceit, any hint of the ulterior motives men had always had when approaching her in the past. She found none. Only sincerity, determination, and something else, something that made her heart race and her breath catch. I believe you, she whispered, and the admission felt like stepping off a cliff into open air. Kieran's smile was slow and warm, transforming his entire face. "That's a start," he said. "Trust is the foundation of anything worth building." The air between them was charged with unspoken possibilities. For a breathless moment, Naomi thought he might kiss her, and she was startled to realize how much she wanted him to. Instead, he released her hands gently and moved back slightly, respecting the boundary between them. "The storm's passing," he noted, nodding toward the window where the rain had lessened to a gentle patter. "We should be able to make it back before dark." The return to practicalities was both a relief and a disappointment. Naomi nodded, rising to her feet. "Yes, we should go." As they prepared to leave, dousing the fire and gathering their belongings, she made a decision. It was impulsive, perhaps foolish, but it felt right in a way few things in her life ever had. "I want to help you," she said as Kieran held the door for her. "With your community by the Cimarron, I want to try." His face lit up with joy so pure it was almost painful to witness. "You won't regret it," he promised. As they rode back toward Oklahoma City through the freshly washed landscape, Naomi wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life or taking the first step toward something wonderful. Either way, there was no turning back now. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Kieran filed a claim on 160 acres along the Cimarron, using the homesteading rights he had preserved by never claiming land in Kansas or other territories. He began the process of building a cabin on the property, hiring laborers from Oklahoma City who were willing to work for good wages regardless of who was paying them. Naomi continued living in her small cabin outside town, but each day brought new developments in their shared vision. Kieran introduced her to people he had met during his travels, men and women who might be interested in joining their community. Jacob Freeman, a former slave who had fought for the Union and now worked as a blacksmith, visited from Guthrie and agreed to relocate once basic structures were in place. The Martinez family, Pedro, Elena, and their 3 children had lost their ranch in Texas to unscrupulous landowners and were looking for a fresh start. Sarah Williamson, a widow from Kansas whose husband had been killed by raiders, expressed interest in opening a small school once enough families had settled. With each new person who responded positively to their vision, Naomi's confidence grew. Perhaps Kieran was right. Perhaps there were enough people searching for something different that their community could succeed. May blossomed into June, and as the Oklahoma summer heat intensified, so did the opposition from Oklahoma City. Word had spread about the mixed settlement being established along the Cimarron, and many viewed it as a threat to their way of life. The hostility manifested in small ways at first: merchants refusing to sell supplies, laborers quitting without notice, whispered threats when Kieran or Naomi ventured into town. But as progress on the settlement continued despite these obstacles, the resistance became more overt. One evening in late June, Naomi was returning from visiting her parents' graves when she found her cabin door splintered open. Inside, destruction greeted her: furniture overturned, her few possessions scattered, walls defaced with crude messages. "Half-breed whore" and "Indian lover die" painted in what looked disturbingly like blood. She stood frozen in the doorway, her mind unable to process the violation. This place, humble as it was, had been her sanctuary. Now it was desecrated, her sense of security shattered. She didn't realize she was trembling until strong hands gripped her shoulders from behind. "Naomi." Kieran's voice was tight with controlled fury. "Are you hurt?" Were you here when they did this?" "No," she managed to say, turning toward him. "I was at the cemetery, I just got back." Relief flooded his features, followed quickly by rage as he looked past her into the cabin. "This ends now," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Pack whatever you can salvage, you're not staying here another night." "Where would I go?" Naomi asked, still dazed by the destruction. "To the homestead. The cabin is nearly finished. It's not fully furnished yet, but it has a roof and walls and they're reinforced. You'll be safe there." But that would mean, she stopped, realizing the implications. An unmarried woman living on a man's property would be seen as. "I'll stay in town until the wedding," Kieran said, answering her unspoken concern, "or build a separate shelter for myself on the property." "Wedding." Naomi repeated, certain she had misheard. Kieran's expression softened and he took her hands in his. "This isn't how I planned to ask," he said ruefully, glancing around at the vandalized cabin. "I had something more romantic in mind, but yes, Naomi, I'm asking you to marry me." She stared at him, unable to form words. They had grown closer over the past weeks, sharing dreams and plans, working side by side. She had come to care for him deeply, even to acknowledge to herself that what she felt might be love. But marriage. "Kieran, we've only known each other for 2 months," she stammered. "And in that time, I've learned everything I need to know about your character, your strength, your heart." His hands tightened on hers. "I love you, Naomi Jackson. I think I have since that first day in the general store when you stood tall despite their cruelty." Love. The word felt foreign on her tongue. No man had ever said he loved her before. "Yes, love," he affirmed. "The kind that grows stronger each day I spend with you. The kind I want to build a life around." Naomi's heart pounded so hard she was certain he must hear it. "People will say you're marrying me for the land or out of pity. Let them say what they will, we'll know the truth." "And what is the truth, Kieran?" she asked, needing to hear it plainly. "That I love you for who you are, all of who you are, your strength, your gentleness, your determination, the way you see beauty in things others overlook, the way you've preserved your capacity for kindness despite how this world has treated you." His voice dropped lower. "The way my heart races when you smile, the way time seems to stop when we're together." Tears filled Naomi's eyes, blurring her vision. "I've never thought I could have this," she whispered. "A man who would love me not despite," he corrected gently. "Never despite. Because of who you are, Naomi, all of you." And then he was kissing her, his lips warm and firm against hers, his arms encircling her waist, drawing her close. Naomi had been kissed before, awkward, fumbling encounters with boys who saw her as exotic, forbidden fruit to be tasted in secret. But this was different. This was a promise, a beginning, a declaration. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Naomi rested her forehead against Kieran's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes," he repeated, his voice hopeful. She looked up at him, a smile breaking through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll help you build our community. Yes to all of it." His answering smile was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her in a circle that made her laugh despite the destruction surrounding them. "We'll be married as soon as possible," he said as he set her down. "The circuit preacher comes through next week. If he won't perform the ceremony, Jacob Freeman knows a judge in Guthrie who will." The practical realities of their situation gradually reasserted themselves as they surveyed the damage to Naomi's cabin. Most of her clothing was salvageable, as were her mother's Bible and the few family mementos she treasured. But the sense of violation remained, a reminder of the obstacles they still faced. "This won't be the last attack," she said as they loaded her belongings onto Kieran's wagon. "They'll come after us at the homestead too." "Let them try," Kieran said grimly. "I've already spoken to Jacob about forging stronger locks and shutters. Pedro Martinez was a Texas Ranger before he became a rancher. He knows about defense. We'll be ready." As they drove away from the cabin that had been Naomi's home for 3 years, she felt a curious mixture of grief and liberation. Behind her lay a life of isolation and quiet endurance. Ahead lay uncertainty, yes, but also possibility, community, and love. The next week passed in a blur of activity. Naomi moved into the newly completed cabin on Kieran's homestead, while he took a room above the livery stable in town. Word of their engagement spread quickly, met with reactions ranging from outright condemnation to cautious support. Marshal Davis himself confronted Kieran outside the land office, his hand resting meaningfully on his pistol. "You're making a mistake, Murphy," he warned. "Mixing blood never leads to anything good." "Interesting perspective, Marshal," Kieran replied evenly, "but I didn't ask for your blessing. Just your adherence to the law you're sworn to uphold. Any more vandalism or threats against Miss Jackson or our property will be reported to the territorial governor's office." The marshal's face darkened. "Threatening me isn't wise, boy." "Neither is failing to protect all citizens equally," Kieran countered. "Something the governor takes quite seriously, I'm told." The standoff ended without violence, but the message was clear. The town's leadership did not approve of their plans and would not offer protection. They would need to rely on themselves and their growing circle of allies, and that circle was indeed growing. Jacob Freeman arrived from Guthrie with a wagon loaded with blacksmithing tools and materials for additional buildings. The Martinez family followed 2 days later, their children wide-eyed with excitement at the adventure of establishing a new home. Sarah Williamson sent word that she would arrive before winter, bringing books for the school she hoped to establish. Others wrote expressing interest: a doctor from Missouri tired of city life, a Quaker family seeking religious freedom, 2 German brothers skilled in carpentry and brewing. On the morning of their wedding day, Naomi stood in the cabin that would soon be officially hers as well as Kieran's, staring at her reflection in the small mirror he had brought her as a gift. She wore a new dress of deep blue calico, her hair arranged simply but neatly, adorned with wildflowers gathered that morning. A knock at the door announced Elena Martinez, who had come to help with final preparations. "You look beautiful, my amiga," the older woman said warmly. "Like a true bride." "I'm so nervous," Naomi admitted. "What if this is a mistake? What if we're moving too quickly?" Elena's dark eyes crinkled with understanding. "When my Pedro asked me to marry him, we had known each other only 1 month. My father said we were fools. 23 years and 5 children later, we are still fools in love." She adjusted a flower in Naomi's hair. "When the heart knows, it knows, and yours knows Senor Murphy is a good man who loves you truly." "But the obstacles we face are many," Elena finished for her. "This is true. But you face them together now, not alone. This makes all the difference, no?" The simple wisdom settled Naomi's nerves. Yes, together they were stronger. Together they could build something that neither could create alone. The wedding took place beside the Cimarron River, where a clearing had been prepared with benches fashioned from split logs. Jacob Freeman had constructed a simple arch from saplings and vines, beneath which Naomi and Kieran exchanged their vows. The circuit preacher had indeed refused to perform the ceremony, citing religious objections to mixed marriages. But Judge William Hargrove from Guthrie, a friend of Jacob's from his army days, had agreed to officiate. The gathering was small but meaningful. Jacob, the Martinez family, Judge Hargrove and his wife, and 3 other families who had expressed interest in joining their community. Naomi had no family present, a fact that brought a pang of sadness amid her joy. But as she looked at the faces of those gathered, she realized that perhaps she was forming a new kind of family. "Do you, Kieran James Murphy, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Judge Hargrove asked, his voice carrying clearly over the river's gentle murmur. "I do," Kieran answered, his eyes never leaving Naomi's face. "And do you, Naomi Ruth Jackson, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion welling in her chest. "Then by the authority vested in me by the territory of Oklahoma, I pronounce you husband and wife." Kieran's kiss was gentle but filled with promise. As they turned to face their small gathering of witnesses, a cheer went up that seemed to echo across the plains. The celebration that followed was simple but joyous. Tables had been set up beneath the cottonwood trees, laden with food contributed by all present. Pedro Martinez played lively tunes on his guitar while his eldest daughter sang songs from their homeland. Jacob Freeman's rich baritone added harmony, and soon everyone was joining in or dancing on the grassy area that had been cleared for that purpose. As dusk fell, Lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow over the gathering. Naomi found herself seated beside Mrs. Hargrove, the judge's wife, a plump, cheerful woman with shrewd eyes. "Your husband is quite the visionary," Mrs. Hargrove observed, watching Kieran as he conversed animatedly with Judge Hargrove and Jacob Freeman. "Yes, he is," Naomi agreed. "Sometimes I worry his vision is too ambitious for this world." "The world changes because of such visions, my dear," the older woman replied. "When William and I first came to Kansas after the war, people said we were fools to believe black and white could live as neighbors and equals. Now our town has a black mayor and a school where all children learn together." She patted Naomi's hand. "It won't be easy. There will be those who try to destroy what you're building, simply because it challenges their beliefs about how the world should be ordered. But if you stay true to your principles and support one another, you can create something lasting." "Thank you," Naomi said, deeply touched by the woman's encouragement. "That means more than you know." As the evening progressed, guests gradually departed, returning to their temporary lodgings in town or to the shelters already constructed on the property. Finally, only Naomi and Kieran remained, standing hand in hand beneath a sky blazing with stars. "Mrs. Murphy," Kieran said, testing the name on his tongue. "How does it feel?" "Strange," Naomi admitted with a small laugh. "Wonderful, terrifying. All appropriate responses to a day of such magnitude." He tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, his touch sending shivers down her spine. "Are you happy, Naomi?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Happier than I ever thought possible." His smile was tender as he took her hand. "Then let's go home, wife." The word was both foreign and deeply right, as they walked together toward the cabin that was now truly theirs, the first permanent structure in what they hoped would become a thriving community. A home built on love, respect, and the belief that people could be better than the prejudices of their time. As summer gave way to fall, the settlement along the Cimarron, which they had named Harmony, began to take shape. New cabins rose alongside Kieran and Naomi's, housing families who shared their vision of a community based on mutual respect rather than racial hierarchy. Jacob Freeman established his smithy beside the river, the ring of his hammer becoming a familiar sound that punctuated their days. The Martinez family planted a large garden, introducing crops from their homeland that thrived in Oklahoma's soil. Sarah Williamson arrived in September with 2 wagon loads of books and educational materials. And by October, she was teaching lessons to 6 children in a one-room schoolhouse built by community effort. Not everything went smoothly. Twice, night riders from Oklahoma City attempted to intimidate them, firing shots into the air and leaving threatening messages. But the settlement's inhabitants had prepared for such incidents, establishing a warning system and defensive measures that prevented any serious harm. More challenging were the everyday conflicts that arose among people from different backgrounds learning to live together. Cultural misunderstandings, disagreements over community decisions, the strain of frontier life all tested their commitment to the ideals upon which Harmony was founded. Through it all, Naomi and Kieran worked as partners, their different strengths complementing each other. Kieran's vision and determination provided direction, while Naomi's practical wisdom and diplomatic skills helped navigate the human complexities of their growing community. By November, Harmony had grown to 12 families, with more expected in the spring. They had established basic governance through weekly community meetings where all adults, regardless of race or gender, had equal voice. Decisions were made by consensus whenever possible, with voting as a last resort. It was at one of these meetings, held in the newly completed community hall, as the first snow of winter dusted the ground outside, that Naomi made an announcement that would add yet another dimension to their shared life. "Before we conclude," she said, rising from her seat beside Kieran, "I have personal news to share." She took a deep breath, her hand instinctively moving to rest on her still flat stomach. Kieran and I are expecting a child in the early summer. The hall erupted in cheers and congratulations. Elena Martinez embraced Naomi with tears in her eyes, whispering promises of support during the months ahead. Jacob Freeman solemnly shook Kieran's hand before breaking into a rare, wide grin and pulling him into a bear hug. Later that night, as they lay in bed with snow falling softly outside their window, Kieran held Naomi close, his hand resting protectively over her abdomen. "Are you afraid?" he asked softly. "A little," she admitted. "Bringing a child into this world, a child of mixed heritage, is no small thing." "Our child will have something neither of us had," Kieran said, "a community that values them for exactly who they are." "Do you really believe we can maintain what we've built here?" Naomi asked. "That harmony can survive the pressures from outside, the inevitable conflicts from within?" Kieran was silent for a moment, considering. "I believe it's worth fighting for," he finally said. "And I believe that with each child born here, each new family that joins us, our roots grow deeper and stronger." He kissed her forehead gently. "I can't promise our child will never face prejudice or hardship, but I can promise they will always know they are loved, valued, and part of something meaningful." Naomi nestled closer to him, drawing comfort from his warmth and conviction. "I want to name the baby after my mother if it's a girl," she said, "singing bird in English." "It's beautiful," Kieran agreed. "And if it's a boy, Jonathan, after my father, but we could call him Jack." "Jonathan Murphy." Kieran tested the name. "Strong, simple, I like it." As they drifted towards sleep, snow continuing to fall outside, Naomi felt a deep sense of peace. The journey ahead would not be easy. Raising a child never was, especially in a frontier community still establishing itself. But she and Kieran would face it together, surrounded by people who shared their vision of a better world. Winter settled over Harmony with a quiet beauty, transforming the landscape with blankets of snow and ice that glittered in the sun. Life slowed but did not stop. There were still animals to tend, repairs to make, lessons to teach, community to build. Christmas was celebrated with a blend of traditions from all the cultures represented in their small settlement. The community hall was decorated with evergreen boughs and handmade ornaments. The Martinez children performed a traditional Mexican pastorla, while Jacob Freeman led them in spirituals he had learned as a child. Sarah Williamson organized the school children to recite poetry, and Naomi shared Cherokee winter stories her mother had taught her. The new year brought both challenges and joys. A harsh blizzard in January tested their preparations and resolve, forcing families to shelter together and share resources. But the crisis strengthened their bonds, proving that the community they were building could withstand adversity. As spring approached, Naomi's pregnancy became more visible, her body changing to accommodate the new life growing within. Kieran's pride and protective instincts grew alongside her expanding belly, sometimes to a degree that made her laugh. "I'm perfectly capable of collecting eggs from the henhouse," she protested one March morning as he tried to take the basket from her hands. "The path is still icy," he pointed out. "Elena said her cousin slipped during her pregnancy, and I am being careful," Naomi interrupted, her tone gentle but firm. "I need to stay active, Kieran. It's better for the baby and for me." He relented with a rueful smile. "I just want to keep you both safe. I know." She kissed him softly. "And I love you for it. But you can't wrap me in cotton wool for the next 3 months. As the land thawed and greenery returned, Harmony welcomed several new families, bringing their population to nearly 50. The community's reputation had spread, attracting those seeking an alternative to the strict racial hierarchies that dominated most frontier settlements. Not all who came stayed. Some found the physical demands of frontier life too challenging. Others were uncomfortable with the community's governance structure or social mixing. But those who remained were committed to building something that defied the conventions of their time. In April, A group of Cherokee traders passing through the area stopped at Harmony, curious about the settlement they had heard described as welcoming to all peoples. Naomi, now in her 7th month of pregnancy, served as interpreter, her mother's language returning to her tongue with practice. The visitors were impressed by what they saw: Indians, whites, blacks, and Mexicans working together as equals, sharing governance and resources. Before departing, they invited Harmony to send representatives to their council fire that summer, suggesting a formal trading relationship. "Your mother would be proud," Kieran told Naomi that night as they discussed the visit. "You're building bridges between worlds, just as she and your father did." "But with more support than they had," Naomi added, leaning against him as they sat on their porch watching the sun set over the Cimarron. "They had to face the world alone. We have Harmony." May brought wildflowers carpeting the prairie and the first crops pushing through rich soil. It also brought increased attention from Oklahoma City, where certain factions viewed Harmony's success as a threat to the established order. Rumors circulated that the settlement was harboring fugitives or inciting Indian uprisings, both completely false but dangerous nonetheless. Marshal Davis made an official visit, ostensibly to investigate these claims, but clearly hoping to find evidence of lawbreaking that would justify shutting down the community. He was visibly disappointed when he found only hardworking families creating a peaceful, productive settlement. "This won't last," he warned Kieran as he prepared to leave. "People aren't meant to mix like this. It goes against nature." "With all due respect, Marshal," Kieran replied, "we have a different understanding of nature and its intentions, and so far nature seems to be smiling on our efforts." He gestured toward the thriving gardens, the new construction, the children playing together without regard to skin color or background. "Judge for yourself. Does this look like something that defies natural law?" The marshal had no answer, but his expression remained skeptical as he rode away. Kieran watched him go with a mixture of concern and determination. The settlement had grown strong enough to withstand individual harassments, but organized opposition from town authorities could still pose a serious threat. "We need allies in Oklahoma City," he told the community council that evening. "People with influence who can speak on our behalf if accusations continue. Judge Hargrove has connections in the territorial government," Jacob Freeman suggested. "And there's a newspaper editor in Guthrie who's sympathetic to our aims. I can write to both." "The Cherokee traders who visited might also help," Naomi added. "They have treaty rights and representatives who meet with territorial officials." Plans were made to cultivate these relationships, to ensure that Harmony had defenders beyond its own boundaries. The community had learned that survival required both internal strength and external support. June arrived hot and brilliant, the prairie grasses tall and rippling in the constant wind. Naomi's time drew near, her body heavy with child, her movements slowed but her spirit strong. The women of Harmony surrounded her with care and wisdom, sharing remedies and advice from their various traditions. On the summer solstice, as the longest day of the year gradually surrendered to twilight, Naomi's labor began. Elena Martinez and Sarah Williamson attended her, along with 2 moons, a Cherokee midwife who had settled in Harmony that spring after hearing of the community from the traders who had visited. Kieran paced outside, alternately praying and cursing as his wife's cries reached him through the cabin walls. Jacob Freeman and Pedro Martinez kept him company, offering quiet support and occasional distraction. "Women are stronger than we'll ever be," Pedro observed, passing Kieran a flask of whiskey. "My Elena brought 5 children into this world. Each time I thought I would die from worry. Each time she emerged stronger." "Naomi is the strongest person I know," Kieran said, taking a sip before handing the flask back. "But that doesn't stop me from being terrified." As night deepened, the cries from within the cabin changed in tenor, and then a new sound pierced the darkness. The thin, indignant wail of a newborn taking its first breath in the world, Kieran froze, his heart seeming to stop and then restart at a different rhythm. The cabin door opened, and Sarah Williamson emerged, her face tired but wreathed in smiles. "Congratulations, Mr. Murphy," she said. "You have a healthy son." Kieran's knees nearly buckled as relief and joy washed over him. "And Naomi?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Tired but well. She's asking for you." Inside the cabin, lit by the golden glow of lanterns, Naomi reclined against pillows, her face exhausted but radiant. In her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, lay a tiny bundle with a shock of dark hair. "Meet your son," she whispered as Kieran approached and carefully sat beside her on the bed. "Jonathan Singing Murphy." "Jonathan Singing," Kieran repeated, gently taking the infant as Naomi offered him. "To honor both sides of his heritage," she explained. "Is that all right?" "It's perfect," Kieran said, his voice thick with emotion as he gazed down at his son's face. The baby's eyes were closed, his features still swollen from birth, but Kieran thought he had never seen anything more beautiful. "He's perfect." The newborn's tiny hand escaped the blanket, fingers splayed like a starfish. When Kieran touched his fingertip to the miniature palm, the baby's fingers curled around it with surprising strength. "He's got a good grip," Kieran said with a laugh that was half sob. "A builder's hands." "Like his father," Naomi said softly. As the midwives discreetly left the new family alone, Kieran stretched out beside Naomi on the bed, cradling their son between them. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking over the eastern horizon, bathing Harmony in the gentle glow of a new day. "Thank you," Kieran whispered, pressing his lips to Naomi's forehead. "For our son, for believing in this dream, for everything." "We built it together," she reminded him, her eyes drifting closed as exhaustion claimed her. "Our own community." As Naomi slept, Kieran held their son, watching the sunrise through the window. Jonathan Singing Murphy, born in a place created by love and determination, would grow up knowing both sides of his heritage, surrounded by people who valued difference rather than feared it. The journey had been difficult and was far from over. There would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight, more hearts and minds to change. But in that moment, holding his son while his wife slept peacefully beside him, Kieran Murphy knew with absolute certainty that it had all been worthwhile. They had made their own community not just for themselves, but for their child, and for all the children who would follow. A place where being of mixed blood wasn't a burden but a blessing. A harmony of different voices creating something stronger and more beautiful than any could produce alone. And as the new day dawned over the settlement that bore that name, bringing light to the homes they had built and the fields they had planted, Kieran made a silent promise to his son. "Your world will be better than ours was. We will make it so." 10 years passed, and Harmony flourished along the banks of the Cimarron River. What had begun as a handful of families united by a shared vision had grown into a thriving settlement of over 200 souls. Fields of wheat and corn stretched away from the river, interspersed with orchards of apple and peach trees now tall enough to provide ample shade. A main street boasted a general store, blacksmith shop, school, and small church, where services rotated among different traditions. Jonathan Singing Murphy, now a lanky 10-year-old with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair, raced along a well-worn path from the schoolhouse toward home, his younger sister struggling to keep up on shorter legs. "John, wait for me." 7-year-old Clara called, her braids bouncing as she ran. Jonathan slowed reluctantly, impatience written across his features. "Hurry up, then. I want to get home before the visitors arrive." "Why, they're just more boring adults talking about boring things," Clara grumbled as she caught up. "They're Cherokee leaders," Jonathan corrected her with the superiority of an older brother. "And they're coming to finalize the trading agreement. Ma says it's important." Clara was unimpressed. "Will there be cake?" Jonathan rolled his eyes but couldn't suppress a grin. "Maybe, Mrs. Martinez was baking this morning." That was motivation enough for Clara, who picked up her pace considerably. They arrived home to find their mother directing preparations for the important meeting. At 32, Naomi Murphy had grown into her role as one of Harmony's leaders with quiet confidence. Her beauty had matured, her face now marked with fine lines that spoke of laughter and occasional worry, her figure fuller after bearing 2 children. "There you are," she said as the children burst through the door. "Jonathan, please take these papers to your father at the meeting hall. Clara, you can help me arrange these refreshments." "Can't Clara take the papers?" Jonathan protested. "I wanted to get my arrowhead collection to show the visitors." "The arrowheads can wait," Naomi said firmly. "Your father needs these notes before the delegation arrives." Recognizing the tone that brooked no argument, Jonathan took the leather folder and headed back out the door. As he made his way through the settlement toward the meeting hall, he greeted neighbors by name the Freemans, whose eldest daughter was his best friend, old Mrs. Williamson, still teaching despite her advancing years, Mr. Martinez, who had taught Jonathan to ride and rope. The community had changed significantly in the decade since its founding. New buildings of sawn lumber had replaced many of the original log structures. Gardens and flower beds softened the frontier austerity. Children born in Harmony ran freely between households where multiple languages were spoken and diverse traditions honored. It wasn't paradise conflicts arose, personalities clashed, hardships came with drought or illness or harsh winters. But the foundation of mutual respect established by the founders had held firm, allowing them to weather these challenges together rather than fracturing along racial or cultural lines. Jonathan reached the meeting hall, a spacious building at the center of the settlement where community decisions were made and celebrations held. Inside, he found his father deep in conversation with Jacob Freeman, now gray-haired but still imposing, and 2 Rivers, a Cherokee man who had joined the community 5 years earlier. At 40, Kieran Murphy had retained his physical strength and confidence, though hard work had added lines to his face and touches of silver to his sandy hair. His role as one of Harmony's founders gave him natural authority, but he had always been careful to share leadership and decision-making with others. "The papers from Ma," Jonathan announced, handing the folder to his father. "Thank you, son," Kieran said, ruffling the boy's hair affectionately. "How was school today?" "Good. Miss Freeman is teaching us about the Civil War." Jonathan hesitated, then added, "Some of the things she tells us are different from what the books say." The adults exchanged meaningful glances. "That's because Miss Freeman's father was there," Kieran explained, nodding toward Jacob. "Sometimes the people who write history books leave out important parts of the story." "Like what happened to the Cherokee?" Jonathan asked. His mother had taught him about the forced removal of her people from their eastern homelands, a history not included in the standard schoolbooks. "Exactly," Kieran confirmed. "That's why in Harmony we try to learn from many different sources, many different perspectives. It gives us a more complete picture of the truth." Jonathan nodded seriously. At 10, he was old enough to understand that the community he had grown up in was different from others, that the friendship and cooperation he took for granted between people of different races was unusual in the larger world. "Can I stay for the meeting with the Cherokee delegation?" he asked hopefully. "I've been practicing the greeting Ma taught me," Kieran smiled. "You can be present for the welcome, but the negotiations themselves are for adults." "Fair enough," Jonathan agreed, pleased to be included at all. As he helped his father arrange chairs and tables for the upcoming meeting, he felt a surge of pride in his community and his family's role in creating it. The delegation arrived an hour later, 5 Cherokee men led by a respected elder named White Path, who had been instrumental in establishing relations between Harmony and the nearby Cherokee settlements. The visitors were welcomed with ceremony and respect, offered refreshments and the chance to rest from their journey before formal discussions began. True to his word, Kieran allowed Jonathan to stay for the initial greetings. The boy stepped forward when prompted and delivered a traditional Cherokee welcome in the language his mother had taught him, his pronunciation careful if not perfect, White Path's weathered face creased in a smile of approval. "The boy honors his mother's people," he said to Naomi in Cherokee. "You have taught him well. He is eager to learn," she replied in the same language. "Both sides of his heritage are important to us." After this exchange, the children were ushered out, and the adults settled down to the serious business of renewing and expanding their trading agreement. Over the years, Harmony had developed mutually beneficial relationships with several neighboring tribes, exchanging goods and knowledge while respecting tribal sovereignty. These relationships had proven crucial during the settlement's early years, providing both material support and political protection when elements in Oklahoma City had sought to undermine or destroy the community. Now, with Harmony well established and growing, they formed the foundation of a regional network that benefited all involved. As the adults conducted their business, Jonathan and Clara joined the other children of the settlement in games and exploration. Unlike their parents, who had grown up in segregated communities learning to fear or distrust those who were different, the children of Harmony moved easily between cultures, absorbing languages and traditions from one another without question. That evening, after the formal negotiations concluded successfully, a celebration was held in the meeting hall. Tables groaned under the weight of dishes from every cultural tradition represented in Harmony: Cherokee bean bread, Mexican chilies rellenos, Irish stew, soul food from the black families, German sausages, and many more. Music and dance followed the feast, with fiddles and guitars, drums and flutes creating a unique harmony of sounds. Children weaved between the adults, occasionally joining in the dancing or forming their own games in corners of the hall. Naomi and Kieran found a quiet moment amid the celebration, stepping outside to enjoy the cool evening air and the brilliant stars overhead. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met that day in the general store?" Naomi asked, leaning against her husband's solid frame. Kieran's arm tightened around her waist. "Sometimes. I might have moved on, searching for something I couldn't quite define. You might have continued enduring Oklahoma City's prejudice alone. And all of this would never have existed," she mused, gesturing toward the settlement spread before them, lantern light glowing warmly from windows, the sounds of celebration drifting from the meeting hall. "Someone else might have built something similar eventually," Kieran suggested. "The idea was ready to be born, I think. The world was changing." "Still changing," Naomi corrected. "There's so much work yet to be done." It was true. Despite Harmony's success, the larger society remained deeply segregated and unequal. Oklahoma Territory was moving toward statehood, and with it came increasing pressure to codify racial divisions into law. The community had already begun discussions about how to protect their unique way of life in this shifting political landscape. "One step at a time," Kieran said, echoing a phrase they had used often over the years when challenges seemed overwhelming. "We've built something real here, something that matters. It may be a small light, but it shines." From the meeting hall doorway, Jonathan appeared, searching for his parents. "Ma, Pa, Mr. White Path is asking for you. He wants to make a special announcement." They rejoined the celebration, where the Cherokee elder indeed had an announcement to make. Standing before the gathered community, White Path spoke of the friendship between his people and Harmony, of the respect that had grown over the years, of the mutual benefits of their cooperation. "To strengthen these bonds," he concluded, "our council proposes a new agreement. We offer 20 young Cherokee to come learn in your school, living among you for 2 seasons each year. In return, we invite 20 of your young people to live among us, learning our ways, our language, our wisdom." The proposal sparked immediate interest and discussion among the Harmony residents. Such an exchange would deepen their relationship with the Cherokee significantly, creating connections that would last generations. "Our children would benefit greatly from such knowledge," Sarah Williamson, now in her 70s but still sharp-minded, observed. and we have much to offer their young people in return. After brief discussion, the community voted unanimously to accept the proposal, with details to be worked out in the coming weeks. The decision was celebrated with renewed music and dancing that continued well into the night. Later, as they prepared for bed in their home, no longer a simple cabin, but a comfortable house built to accommodate their growing family, Naomi and Kieran reflected on the day's events. "It's more than we ever dreamed possible," Naomi said as she brushed out her hair, now streaked with occasional strands of silver. "Not just surviving, but thriving, creating something that might outlast us." "The best part is watching the children," Kieran replied, removing his boots. "Jonathan and Clara, yes, but all of them. They don't carry the same burdens we did. They see possibilities where we saw barriers." Naomi set down her brush and moved to sit beside him on the bed. "They'll face their own challenges. The world beyond Harmony isn't changing as quickly as we might hope. True. But they'll face those challenges with different tools than we had, more knowledge, more confidence, the certainty that another way is possible because they've lived it." He took her hand, his thumb tracing the lines of her palm in a gesture familiar from countless such moments over their years together. "Do you regret any of it? The struggles, the sacrifices?" "Never," Naomi said without hesitation. "How could I regret what gave us Jonathan and Clara? What gave all these children a place to grow up free from the hatreds that shaped our own childhoods?" Kieran's smile was tender as he leaned in to kiss her. "I knew from that first day that you were exceptional, Naomi Jackson. I just had no idea how exceptional." "We built it together," she reminded him, echoing words she had spoken the night of Jonathan's birth. "Our own community." Outside their window, Harmony settled into night's peaceful embrace. The settlement would face more challenges in the years ahead as Oklahoma moved toward statehood, as national politics shifted, as the march of progress brought new opportunities and threats. But its foundations were strong, built on respect, cooperation, and the radical notion that human beings could choose to live differently than those who had come before them. And in homes throughout the community, children dreamed of futures their parents could never have imagined, secure in the knowledge that they belonged to something rare and precious, a place where having mixed blood wasn't a burden to bear, but simply one more thread in the rich tapestry of human experience. In the years that followed, Harmony continued to evolve and grow. As Oklahoma achieved statehood in 1907, bringing with it more formalized segregation laws, the community found itself navigating increasingly complex legal and political landscapes. But the foundations laid by Kieran, Naomi, and the other founders proved resilient. Children grew to adulthood, some remaining to build lives in the community their parents had created, others venturing out into the wider world, carrying Harmony's values with them. Jonathan Singing Murphy attended university in Kansas, returning with a law degree that proved invaluable in protecting the settlement's interests. Clara became a teacher, continuing Sarah Williamson's work with a new generation of children from diverse backgrounds. By 1920, when Naomi and Kieran celebrated their silver wedding anniversary, Harmony had grown to nearly 500 residents and had spawned 2 daughter communities founded on similar principles. The cultural exchange program with the Cherokee had expanded to include other tribes, creating a network of mutual support and understanding that helped all involved weather the continuing storms of prejudice and discrimination in the larger society. The celebration of their anniversary brought together the original founders, those still living, and many who had joined in the decades since. Jacob Freeman, now in his 80s but still sharp-minded, raised a toast to the couple whose vision had created a home for so many. "To Kieran and Naomi Murphy," he said, his voice still carrying the resonant power that had made him a respected leader. "Who heard the word impossible and took it as a challenge rather than a limitation?" Laughter and applause followed, along with more toasts, music, and dancing that continued long into the night. As the celebration finally wound down, Kieran and Naomi found themselves alone on their porch, watching the stars as they had countless times over their years together. 25 years, Naomi mused, her head resting on her husband's shoulder. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you walked into that general store and changed everything. Best decision I ever made, Kieran replied, his arm tightening around her waist. Though I had no idea where it would lead us. Would you have done it anyway, if you had known all the challenges we would face in a heartbeat? He turned to look at her, his eyes still as blue and steadfast as when they had first met, though now surrounded by lines carved by weather and laughter and occasional sorrow. You, without question, she answered, though I might have been less afraid if I had known how it would turn out. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the community they had built, distant laughter from the last revelers. A baby's cry quickly soothed, the gentle lowing of cattle in nearby pastures. A world created by love and determination, by the refusal to accept that things could not be different. We should write it down, Naomi said suddenly. The story of harmony, how it began, what we learned, the mistakes we made, and the victories we won, for those who come after us. Kieran considered this. A record for future generations. I like the idea, though it's not just our story to tell. No, she agreed. We'll ask everyone, all the founders still with us, the children who grew up here, those who joined along the way, different voices, different perspectives. The complete picture. Just like we taught Jonathan when he was questioning his history books, Kieran observed with a smile, the more voices, the closer to truth. Over the following year, they did exactly that, collecting stories, memories, and reflections from everyone willing to share. The result was a handwritten manuscript titled simply Harmony, a community's journey, preserved in the settlement's small library for future generations. The final page, written in Naomi's careful hand, read, "We built harmony because we believed another way was possible. Because we refused to accept that people must be divided by race or origin or belief. Because we knew in our hearts that what unites us as human beings is stronger than what separates us. It has not been easy. We have made mistakes, faced opposition, sometimes fallen short of our own ideals. But we persisted, and in persisting, created something that will outlast us, a community where children grow up knowing they are valued for who they are, not judged by the blood in their veins or the color of their skin. To those who come after us, build on what we began, improve it, expand it. Share it with a world that still desperately needs to believe that harmony among different peoples is not just a dream, but a possibility within reach. And remember always that the most important foundations of community are not buildings or laws, but the relationships between people, relationships built on respect, understanding, and the recognition of our common humanity. With hope for the future, Naomi Jackson Murphy and Kieran James Murphy, founders. Harmony Settlement, Oklahoma, 1921. The manuscript became a cherished part of community lore, read at celebrations and taught to children as they came of age. And though Harmony would face many challenges in the decades ahead, economic depressions, world wars, continuing struggles for civil rights, its core principles remained intact, passed from generation to generation like the most precious of inheritances. Naomi and Kieran lived to see their grandchildren grow to adulthood, to witness the slow, painful progress of the larger society toward the ideals they had embodied in their small community. They did not live to see the civil rights movements of the 1950s and 60s, or the gradual dismantling of legal segregation, but they planted seeds that would bear fruit long after they were gone. They died as they had lived together in the winter of 1947, within days of each other. They were buried beneath the great oak tree by the Cimarron River, where they had exchanged their wedding vows nearly 50 years earlier. Their headstone bore a simple inscription, Kieran and Naomi Murphy, 1868-1947, and 1876-1947. Then we'll make our own community, and the community they made lived on. a testament to the power of love over prejudice, of determination over despair, of the human capacity to create something better than what came before. A harmony of different voices, creating together something no single voice could achieve alone.